We had some moms come up to us that were literally in tears, and I'm just like, what's going on? I'm thinking maybe their kid got hurt, and she's just coming up to me in tears, and she's just saying thank you because I haven't been able to do anything with my kids the whole entire year.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast.
Welcome back to the Real Food, Real People podcast. I'm Dylan Honcoop, and this is my journey all over Washington State to get to know the real people behind our food. This week, we talk with Scott Middleton of Middleton Six Sons Farms. And yes, there are 6 of them connected with the farm. We find out more about that in the conversation. They do all kinds of stuff. Their number one is asparagus, but it's so much more than that, including tourism on their farm, welcoming people to their farm to see what it's all about. And thousands of people do come to their farm every fall for their fall festival. We'll find out all about it this week on the Real Food, Real People podcast at Middleton Six Sons Farms in Pasco, Washington. I want to thank our sponsors. First, the Dairy Farmers of Washington, supporting the podcast and inspiring the desire for real local dairy products. You can find them online at wadairy.org, and we so much appreciate the generous support that they've given to make this podcast a reality. Also, Manna Insurance Group. Big thank you to them. You can find them online, mannainsurancegroup.com. We appreciate not only them supporting and making the podcast a reality, but also protecting the financial well-being and future of our families, our communities, the things that they do not only for individuals, but farms and small businesses here in Washington, as well as in California and Arizona. So big thank you to them. Make sure to thank them for supporting the Real Food, Real People podcast. Now we go to Pasco to talk again with Scott Middleton of Middleton Six Sons Farms. You guys on your farm do pretty interesting mix of different things.
We are diversified.
So let me see if I got this right. Asparagus,
Yep.
hay,
Mm-hmm.
and then like agritourism and some like small farming stuff.
Yep.
Fall festival.
Fall festival.
That we can see on the wall back
Yep.
there. So talk about everything that you guys do. It's okay. Middleton Six Sons Farms. Do
Yep.
I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay. What do y'all do? How do you describe it?
So primarily we're asparagus growers.
Okay.
And then we do the alfalfa. And now we started up with a fall festival. We've been doing that for a number of years. And we kind of go off my dad's motto, diversify and make sure that you don't put all your eggs in one basket type of deal. And so that's kind of how we are running our operation now, is that we have a bunch of different little things that we do. And they're not so little anymore. Each one has a lot of work to do in it, and we have fun doing it.
So there are seriously 6 brothers?
There is 6 of us, and so we're not all on the farm, but there's 3 of us on the farm right now that help out here, and then but all of us have all worked on this farm. All of us were born and raised here in Pasco, and we all worked in our whole entire childhood was here on the farm, so it was a lot of fun.
Your dad's still working on the farm too?
He is still working.
Does he feel not included since his name isn't in the Six Sons?
It was his idea, so he kind of took some pride and joy in the 6 sons.
Yeah.
And so, he's definitely on the day-to-day operations and helps out a ton with everything. So we get all of our learning, everything we learned is from him, and we get to teach him a couple little things too on the way.
We'll get to that part.
Yeah.
I like that. The young guys teaching the old dogs new tricks sometimes.
Yep.
It does happen, contrary to popular belief.
Yeah.
But how far back does his farming history go? How far back does it go in your family?
We're third-generation farmers here, or I'm a third-generation farmer here in the Columbia Basin. My grandpa actually came over here, and so it'd be my dad's dad came over here to the Columbia Basin, and it was desert out here. It was just sagebrush. There wasn't very much of anything going on out here, and today it's grown into this huge city, and so it's amazing to see. But yeah, my dad, they were over there in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and they had the opportunity. I think my dad was 4 years old at the time, and they decided to come out here to the Columbia Basin in Block 16, and they started farming. And there wasn't very much of anything out here, but they decided to try to make a living, and that's how they got started.
What had they been doing in Nebraska?
I'm not quite sure.
A long time ago. That was back when people would have a few cows.
It wasn't working that well. And
yeah.
So they came over here, and my grandpa also grew asparagus too. And so kind of a niche crop to get into it, and people were willing to work and cut the asparagus as well. So it was good.
So he saw desert, but he saw potential there?
Yeah. Yeah, the Columbia irrigation project, they started getting the water from the river and started using it. And, the people started finding out that there was water in the ground too. And so getting some wells dug. And so they used the irrigation project out there, and they still use my grandpa's farm still out there. My uncle farms it, and they still use their siphon tubes and do all that irrigation. And they got pivots now as well. So
I guess part of the discovery too would be finding out, hey, this soil is really fertile.
Yeah.
Once you put some water on it.
You almost can grow almost anything besides citrus out here. You can pretty much grow anything you want. And so, the sandy soil out here, actually, you can grow some of the best crops in the world.
But without water, you wouldn't necessarily know it. Probably just a bunch of sagebrush, like you said.
You wouldn't know it until you got this water. As soon as they started getting the water in the ground, then they realized we got something going here.
So what year roughly would that have been?
Let's see. My dad started here on our farm in 1974, and then, it'd be 19, I want to say it was 1954 when we came over here.
It's amazing, just like, 60, 70 years, how much has happened. So you guys do asparagus. You said that's kind of your bread and butter.
Yep.
How does that work? What's your process for growing asparagus?
So first we plant it. It's either direct seed or you plant the crowns in the ground. And then you have to wait 2 to 3 years in order to get the crop off of it. And so there's that waiting period where you can't cut it, the whole entire season yet.
Why is that? Because you need a main plant to send up shoots or build crowns in the...
Yeah, you're just making sure that the root structure is getting strong and can provide, because that asparagus will last for 10 years in the ground. So you keep on cutting it every year, and so that let it establish into the ground. And
because what we eat for asparagus is really just like the baby shoots of a much bigger plant, right?
Yeah, essentially.
But in all that time, do you let them get big?
Yeah.
Or
after the season's over, so the season's in spring, and we do it for 70 days. And once you're done, you can kind of tell when the asparagus plant is starting to get stressed out. And once it gets too hot, you kind of just let it go into a fern, and we just keep watering it all the way until November. Or it'd be about end of October we water it. And so it's definitely a fun crop. It's all, people don't realize, but it's still all hand-picked, all done by hand. It's picked up, the boxes are picked up out of the field by hand, and this warehouse is just one of the shipping receiving points, and then we ship it off to our packer. And so
wow,
it's a lot of manual labor.
Where does all of your asparagus go to then? Who are you? Does it go all over the country, or? All
over the country. It also gets pickled as well. Johnson Produce does that, and so they pickle it. And they pickle it for Costco primarily. If you're familiar with the Schwans, gets the flash frozen and gets frozen into that product. And then the fresh product, it's gone all over the place. It's gone into Safeways, Albertsons. Our packers send it all the way to New Jersey even sometimes. It's gone across, especially during that pandemic year, there wasn't much produce coming from outside of the country. And so everybody was kind of just trying to grab at whatever was available at the time. And luckily enough for us, asparagus is the first crop to come out in the spring usually. And so people were just dying for asparagus last year. So it was great.
So if people are getting fresh asparagus, thinking of the blue rubber bands, or maybe yours aren't blue. I know they're different colors too, but I usually think blue. Does it say like Middleton on it or something?
It'll say Washington.
It'll say Washington.
Yeah, Washington State. And so, and there's not many asparagus growers left anymore in Washington State. There's a few of us that are here, and so that are still doing it. And as long as we have the workers to cut it, we're just going to keep on going. And so,
what's the reason why there aren't a lot of asparagus farms here anymore?
The competition. So our competition from outside of the country, primarily Mexico and Peru, they can compete because they're only paying their labor $10 a day.
A day.
And obviously we're the highest minimum wage in Washington State, and we're one of the highest minimum wage in the country. And so they're getting at least, $13, $14 an hour to work here. And so they're people, competing wise,
Your cost of doing business is a lot different. Than producing in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So labor is kind of the big thing with that because it's a hand harvested crop.
If it's our biggest expense by far. And so Mexico can drive the price down and they can send it across the country. Even some of the packers in California, they were packing it coming in from, the asparagus was coming from Mexico, but they were packing it in the U.S. And sometimes I think they sometimes trick the consumer because they'll say packed in the U.S., but it's grown in Mexico. They kind of forget the label right below it. It says grown in Mexico, and so
I bet they don't forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where you want to be savvy when you're shopping at the store, when you're buying food for your family. You want to know where it came from.
Right.
And me personally, I'm going to try to get as much food as I can grown in the U.S. for sure. Mm-hmm. If it's grown in Washington, I'm all over it. And, the closer to home, the better.
Yep.
But that's a good point because sometimes you can think, I'm getting U.S. grown stuff. But if it says packed in and not grown in the U.S., you don't know.
And so, some consumers don't even realize.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the frustrating thing is because Mexico can cut in certain areas, they can cut almost 365 days out of the year.
Wow.
And so we say it's almost the whole entire time, but we say it's a little bit more because they can cut whenever they want, pretty much.
Yeah.
And we only have a certain window here in Washington State. And there's only one other state that's really, Michigan is the other state that's growing asparagus. California used to. I would say I think there's only a couple hundred acres left in California right now because Mexico has just totally dominated their market now. And so I wish there was something that we could do to limit when they can come into our markets, but we just haven't done anything about it yet.
It gets into trade deals and
Yep.
all that exciting political stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's way over my head how that all gets dealt with. So asparagus, the big thing being labor. Is it possible to mechanize that harvest?
There's machines out there, but it's so difficult because the asparagus shoots are they're only half an inch, quarter of an inch, even sometimes they're even touching together, and so one will be prime 8-9 inches, the other one will just still be at 4 inches. So you nick that other one, you damage that other spear. And so to get it perfect, it's never going to happen, at least in my eyes. But there are machines that can, get most of it, maybe 70% of it. But still, there's still going to have to be somebody cleaning behind it, always.
And then, so asparagus is your springtime.
Mm-hmm.
And then, let me guess, hay is your summertime.
Yep.
And is it all alfalfa that you do?
All alfalfa. We grow about 300 acres of wheat, and so that also plays into the factor of because we'll two-tie and big bale the straw up after the wheat harvest, and so we're actually doing first cutting hay while we're doing asparagus, the tail end of asparagus, and so
that's got to be crazy busy.
It is a wild thing going on. So we're definitely and then now we're strawberry growers too. And so we threw in a little 5-acre strawberries to do the tail end of asparagus because we run a little retail store outside of here. We wholesale some of our asparagus and out of our roadside stand.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of moving pieces going on in the first week of June because we're doing hay, asparagus, now we're doing the strawberries, and we do a little bit of everything during the month of June. That's kind of our we call it busy week or hell week or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So it's just super busy, but it all gets done every year. It's just a little bit,
somehow you get through it.
I don't think we sleep much during that time, but it gets all done.
And then in fall time, you guys are agritourism.
Agritourism, fall festival.
So explain what that is.
So the Middleton's Fall Festival, we started up in 2013, and 2013, 2014 is when we started doing the corn maze and the pumpkin patch. And it was my brother Keith's idea. We just wanted to get people out here and kind of just learn about, farming practices. There's people, we're only 5-10 miles outside of town. Mm-hmm. And people have no idea where their produce comes from, some of the things that are grown out here. And people are like, oh, yeah, I've never been out here before. And we're just like, we're right here. We're right here. Yeah. We've always been right here. Since 1974, we've been right here. And so it started to give, the idea was to give people an education of where their crops are grown, how it's grown. And then we started doing the pumpkins and the corn maze, and people it grew into a huge community event. And so it's awesome to have people come out to the farm, get on all these little rides that we do. We call them our little grain carts right here. We start setting up for it right now. We just planted the corn maze last week. The pumpkins we planted 40 acres of pumpkins last week. And so we prepare right when October's done, we keep on preparing for it the whole next year. So we already have ideas. What are we going to do? And so we do 40 activities. We do 40 activities. We got the ball zone.
Like what kinds of things? Oh, man.
That's like a little basketball toss game. And then we have slides, which the slides are made out of the liners are potato liners, truck bed liners. You roll down. Everything that we do is kind of has like a little farm theme around it.
Yeah.
We have the cornhole games, and then we do potato cannons, which are awesome. They put huge dents in these big, we put a bunch of wrecked cars out there, and they'll have those cars just become dented. Those things shoot like 100 miles an hour, which are awesome. And so it's not like the old days where you had a hairspray can and just launch it out.
Shh, don't tell the kids how to do that.
Yeah. And then we do the hay rides, and now we do little private campfire pits out in the corn maze. So we plant the corn right now. Most people are like, hey, this is way too late to plant corn. We plant the corn maze right now to keep it green for the season, and then we do sunflowers too. Right before September, we call it our Sunflower Festival, and so we do you-pick sunflowers, and then it goes right into the fall season. So
you guys do a lot of stuff here.
Mm-hmm. And then fireworks every Saturday night during the fall festival.
Really?
This year is what we're going to do. We decided.
That's cool.
They didn't have fireworks shows last summer during the 4th of July. And so we decided, hey, there wasn't any fireworks. The pyrotechnician that was here, he's like, you guys want to do something for Saturday in the fall? And we tried it one night, and then we said, let's just do it every Saturday night. It was so much fun. So we're going to do that as well. And so we have, the food is a whole nother animal too. During the fall season, we do pumpkin donuts, apple cider donuts, all the good stuff.
Making me hungry for treats now. When does this fall festival start? I think I need to already start arranging my schedule to drive out here from the west side of the state.
70 days, just about. We'll be in middle September.
Middle September.
When we'll go. So we'll do 2 weekends in the last 2 weekends of September. And then this year there's 5 weekends in October. That last weekend in October is like October 31st, and I think that's a Saturday, and then November 1st is a Sunday or Monday. And so that'll be the last day, and so it's a lot of fun.
So if I just want you to be able to get a plug-in for this, if people want more info, where do they go? Website, Facebook page?
Facebook, Instagram, but it's middletonsfallfestival.com.
Okay.
And then they can go right on there, find the tickets, and reserve your tickets. You can get them online. It's a lot easier to do it online because there are lines. If you come in the middle of October, it's a little bit busier. If the end of October or the beginning of October is always the best time to come because it's not as crazy. But we have a lot of fun out here. And then we grow like 20 different varieties of pumpkins as well. And so
Who knew that there were that many kinds of pumpkins that people could want in the fall time?
We'll have whatever size and color of pumpkin we'll probably have.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we also, obviously we had to do COVID restrictions. There was hand sanitization stations everywhere, and we had to spray down everything. And so there's a lot of things that we had to overcome with that, but it went well. Obviously people were itching to get out and do something, and it's mainly, I'd say 98% of it is outdoors. And so It's you can breathe fresh air too. So it was nice.
Yeah, with COVID, that was. Wasn't there some back and forth with what the state was going to allow with agritourism in the fall for all the different like U-picks and pumpkin patches and things like that?
Yeah, it was wild, especially here in Washington State, is that Governor Inslee decided to not allow anything to happen. Just pretty much grab your pumpkin and leave is what he came out with. That was pretty much the gist of it. And then 6 days before the fall festival opened, our fall festival opened, he changed his mind and said, hey, as long as you're doing, it's an outside event, you have your masks on, everything's sanitized, then we're not going to restrict anything. And so as long as you abide by some of the cleanliness rules, I guess.
For sure.
And so we set it up. Either way, we were just kind of like, hey, we're just going to set it up. We'll see what he says. He might change his mind, and he did. And then everybody found out because obviously the news got a hold of it, and so everybody's like, okay, we're going to go out to Middleton's now. And so
that's awesome. It
turned out to be awesome, and obviously the community responded. We had people coming from Seattle, actually, and Spokane, and so it was awesome.
It makes sense. If there's a way to stay safe during the pandemic, and that's the things that people were doing, outdoor activities in a way that they can socially distance, keep their mask on, keep clean, to be close and enclosed spaces with other people. People didn't have a lot of other options at that point.
Yeah.
So they were looking for things to do. You know, those kinds of events outside were a big deal for people who had been kind of cooped up for months.
Mm-hmm. It was really awesome to see. We had some moms come up to us that were literally in tears. And I'm just like, what's going on? I'm thinking maybe their kid got hurt, and she's just coming up to me in tears, and she's just saying thank you because I haven't been able to do anything with my kids the whole entire year. And it's just something that, you wouldn't realize. You're really like, because, in farming, we're just out here going to town, doing our work, and, just putting our nose to the grindstone and, going about our business, trying to get, providing food for everybody. And sometimes it's an afterthought that people are really cooped up inside. They really can't do anything. And then we put on this event, and that was and that happened multiple times throughout the festival. It was just like, you really don't know until, someone comes up to you and says, thank you. And that's what we do it for, is just seeing people come out here, smile, have a good time. And, it was touching to see that happen.
When you do have the advantage of being close to a significant population center in the Tri-Cities. Yeah. Right? Versus, up in the middle of wherever, North Central, you aren't going to do something in like Waterville that I drove through yesterday. I love that town, but there aren't a lot of people there to come to a festival, even though I guess, especially last year, they may have driven from far and wide to get there. At the same time, being this close to the city, I would guess has its challenges too. Do you feel pressure from the city getting closer all the time? Because, and you said quite a bit earlier, it's been growing like crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely wild. So on the fall festival side of it, it's awesome for us because we're getting more people to come out to the farm, and we're super close, so people don't have to make the drive. But at the same time, you can see right behind us in our back door, there's buildings going up. There's industrial buildings taking out farms. They're putting processing plants there or what have you, and so it's a little bit scary because you can see it. You can literally see it from our doorstep that people are getting closer and closer and closer. And it's sad to see some of the farmland go away. It's exciting to see the town grow, but at the same time, that there's farms being ripped out because they're paying high dollar prices just to move and get out of the big city and come to this city, which is only getting bigger as well. And so it's kind of a catch-22 on that side of it.
We deal with that in Western Washington, and now you're dealing with it here too, where it probably affects land prices, I would imagine, because something that's going to be developed for housing or developed for industrial property is probably worth a lot more per acre than
a lot more.
A wheat field, an asparagus field, even more of a cash crop field like strawberries or something like that. How do you compete, if you need land?
It's really hard nowadays, because the prices is the industrial properties and some of these, there's even plants coming from California that are coming over here, and the processing facilities they're willing to pay whatever it costs, because over there, to them, especially even on the west side, or even, let's talk about California prices, we're, a quarter of what they're paying over there. So they're like, oh, even at a high dollar price, it's half of what they pay over there. So it's a lot cheaper to come over here, start their processing facility, or start a house, because they don't have to pay $1 million in Seattle. If you pay $500,000 for a place over here, you can get a really, really nice home.
Exactly.
That's what's happening. And so
in Seattle, you get a shack for that price anymore these days. It's unbelievable.
Yep.
Even in my little town, way up, 100 miles north of Seattle, the, small houses, starter houses, just in, average neighborhood, going for prices that just make my jaw drop. It's hard to see, I think, from the outside, the effect that ends up having on farming. But you're saying that does affect the farming community. Yeah, that kind of develop.
And it'd be better if, the people that are moving over here are more supportive of the people that, have been here. I mean, we've been taking care of this land for a long time, and all these farmers, we treat. And so there's some misconception on farming practices. People think, oh, it's big farming. No, a lot of farms out here, especially in the Columbia Basin or even in Washington State, are still small farms. They're still family farms, mom and pop shops, and their sons are taking over, or their kids are starting to get involved. But the people think that it's big farming only out here, and it's not. It's just,
I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what farming looks like, and so they see. Right. I mean, farms are bigger now than they were 50 years ago.
Right.
So they see that and they think, oh, that must be huge. When it's like all relative, right? Yeah. A matter of scale compared to Midwest or other places. Yeah, it is a lot smaller here. Yeah. A lot smaller on the west side too than here on the east side even.
So that's kind of like the good thing about the fall festival too, is that people get out here, and when they're out here during our fall festival, they get to see, we put our name on the fall festival, Middleton's Fall Festival, but they really get to see that we're walking around. I spend half the time, I think, walking around just talking to people, because some people are they just don't know that, there's people out here that still farm, and our name's attached to it, and a lot of people's names are attached to their farms, and this is our livelihood, and we take it seriously.
So it's still a family farm.
Yep.
How many acres do you guys farm all told between everything, roughly?
With owned and leased ground, we're probably at like 3,000 acres, around that, depending on the year.
Yeah, see, for somebody, even for me, from farming on the west side, that sounds huge. Yeah. But then talking to you, it's still just your family farming that.
Yep.
Plus your crews.
Yep. 6 or 7 full-time employees. Now, during asparagus season and the fall festival, asparagus season, we have about 150 employees. In the fall season, I think this season, we're probably going to have 200 employees. A lot of them are teenagers or their first time job working, and but it works out great. And so, but for the most part of it, there's only 7 or 8 of us guys out here, and working out here on the farm. And so it's definitely a small operation to handle a little. It's a big. I guess it's a big thing to handle with all the acres that we have and how diversified we are. Yeah, but we all get it done at the end of the day.
Well, the key, it sounds like, just listening to the diversity that you guys have, the different crops, I mean, from the outside, you're like, well, that's kind of a interesting mix of things. But for you, it sounds like it's all about timing for the most part.
Yeah.
Like you have a main crop for this part of the year, this part of the year. So that keeps you from, if they were all at the same time, you could never do all of those things.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Definitely diversifying. The way that we have it is, perfectly set up where it's not, if there would be no way we could do all of them at the same time, but the way that it's laid out, it definitely gives us some breathing room to get ready for the next thing. But it also keeps us on our toes, because some of it, like how we were saying, that it overlaps, hay overlaps, and then we're still doing hay, and and harvesting some other different crops during corn and everything during our fall season. So that the fall season's even more wild because we have this, what started out as, 1,000 or 2,000 people coming.
Yeah.
And now we're having a couple thousand people on a weekend, and now it's kind of grown into this huge monster. It's like, okay, we got the fall festival, now we got corn harvest and hay harvest, trying to finish everything up. It's a little wild during that time, but it also has its season. So we know it's only going to last us. We got a little 2-3 week window of super, super busyness, and how are we going to get it all done?
Yeah.
But it always gets done. I remind my dad, it always gets done, Dad. Don't worry.
You get a little bit stressed out?
Yeah. It's just there's so many things juggling in the air, and so and there's so many hours in a day where you can get it all done. And so there's some sleepless nights during that time, but it all does get done.
Yeah, that's my dad's line. Never enough hours in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Only so many hours in a day. I got to keep going.
Yep.
What's that like working with family?
It's fun, but it's also that it brings its challenges too.
Yeah.
And so we all know each other's quirks, and we all know each other's buttons, which ones to push and which ones not to push. Yeah. And so it's a blessing in disguise because I get to work with my dad. I get to work with my brothers. My wife is heavily involved into it, my wife Angie, and then our other, the other wives that are part of it too. And so it's definitely, especially during the fall season, it's my brothers and our wives and my dad and my mom. We're all doing it, putting our part into it. And sometimes I take it for advantage. Some people don't see their parents, especially with the pandemic. Some people's like, hey, I haven't seen my parents in a year and a half. I'm like, what? I see my parents almost every other day, if not every day. And so I get to work along, they're some of my greatest friends.
But you said you're starting to teach your dad some new tricks too.
Yeah. There's some things about the fall festival that he's like, why would you even do that? This type of things like, well, let's just try it,
Yeah.
You don't know if it's going to work or not unless you try it. So we did the pumpkins and did some, different ideas with these little games. And my dad's like, really? And then you'll see these kids come out and they just think it's a blast to do it. And it's just little certain things. The biggest thing that we get a kick out of is that it's called the corn pit or corn box. And we just take grain corn, we throw it in a box at the fall festival. And I'm like, well, my dad's like, why would someone play in that? And so I'm like, Dad, it's kind of like a sand pit, a sandbox. Huh. He's like, I don't know if that's going to work. And there's probably 150 kids in that thing just throwing corn at each other and, making a mess. And it was just a lot of fun. And my dad's like, I guess that did work.
I just talking about working with family, I know that can be one of the toughest things is that transition from one generation to the next, because it's not just like one day where your dad hands you the keys.
Right.
You're working side by side with him for years and years and years. Well, I mean, some farming dads, I don't know about your dad, can never totally retire.
Yeah.
They don't want to. But then it's like you're the new generation. You want to try different things, do things maybe a different way than your dad did.
Yep.
And that can be a sticking point. What's the trick to? I guess you proved him wrong, so maybe that's the trick.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that out loud to him. No, but there's some certain things that we're in that transition stage right now. My dad's, he's 70 years old.
Yep. And
so he's getting ready to. We call him semi-retired, but he's here most of the time during the farming season. He's here most of the time. And so...
Well, semi-retired is still probably 40, 50 hours a week for a farmer.
At least.
Versus full-time, which is like 80 to 100.
Yeah. And he's here. He would say he's here more than that. And so there's that transition stage. And so we're working through that right now. And so it's definitely a give and take type thing. And so it's like... it's really just being clear and concise and, making those, meetings that we're having weekly meetings right now. So always on Mondays at 1 p.m., you'll see us in the office as a family. My brothers and my mom and dad, we're going over our, what's going on this week, what we have. And so that way we're always on the same page. And so I think that's healthy for many farms to do, even though they're like, like this week, there's like, there's not that much to do, but then when you get down to it and we start talking like, oh yeah, we forgot about this, this, and this, which in the back of a farmer's mind, you're like, oh yeah, I knew all that stuff. But then when you put it on paper, it's like, okay, there's, it's always better to have those weekly meetings or, bi-weekly meetings just to make sure everybody's on the same page. And I think that makes everything a little bit more smoother in the end too. Communication. Yep. Yeah. Communication is definitely key, because if you don't voice out your expectations of each other, then how are you going to ever know you can't just pretend that person's going to know what you're thinking. Yeah. And so, and that goes both ways. My dad and I and all of us, we definitely communicate, especially on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, especially if you're working hand in hand. So yeah, it works really well doing that. What about your kids? Do you have kids? I do have kids. My little William just turned 1 year old yesterday. Awesome. I had a little birthday party for him, and so that's what's great about having a fall festival. We took the barrel train ride. Yeah. I have all these little toys and activities to do, and just like, we can just add it to the birthday party. Brought the little telehandler and put the piñata on it. Nice. And then I have a little girl, Hannah. She's 3 years old. Awesome. Mm-hmm. So are your kids going to farm? What do you think? Are you going to encourage them to get into it? I'm not going to force them to it, but I'm definitely going to encourage it. I mean, I lived on the west side for a little bit, going to college over there at Northwest, and it definitely gives you an eye opener to come back to the farm. And sometimes people are like, hey, I want to get out of the farm and go try something different and live somewhere else. And, actually doing that and then coming back, it's like you miss it. You miss the hay seasons. You miss growing, different crops and trying different things. And every single day is a different day out here. You're not doing the same repetitive thing. And there's a different problem to arise, and you have to solve it. And so even having my little son, he's been riding on the tractor with me a couple times during the spring season and hay season, and having him jump up on my legs and put his hands on the wheel at 1 year old, is just like, okay, I can see something with this. Yeah. And so you kind of hope that, that's what happens with your son. And so obviously I'm going to have some more kids because I need more help around here. That's what farmers always say. You have more kids. The more help you can get. So that's why my dad had 6 of us, I think, to help out around here. He definitely had his handline changers. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Changing irrigation. Yeah. Oh, yes. You said you went to school over in Western Washington. Mm-hmm. What were you studying, and what was your plan at that point? Were you thinking you were going to farm? The funny thing is, when I got out of high school, I thought I was going to go into youth ministry because you're hanging out with youth and you're, making a difference in kids' lives and, doing all that. And you're like, that was my dream. I'm like, hey, I'm going to help out with youth. That sounds like the funnest job ever. And then actually doing it, I did it while I was at Northwest University, and I was going to go and get my degree in ministry my first year. And then I did it. I worked at a church, and I'm like, well, this is fun, but there's a lot of different aspects to it besides this, besides just hanging out with you. It's not just fun all the time, yeah. And so there's a lot of different things. And then I took an intro to business class, and I'm like, man, this is what I'm designed to do. This is, I need to go back to the farm or, go back into agriculture. That's kind of my passion. And I miss the atmosphere and being outside. And then we started doing the fall festival too. And I'm just like, wait, I can kind of do all of this. We can make a difference in our community. We can make a difference in the youth and teaching people, having field trips come out here and teaching kids, this is how corn's grown, or this is how the life cycle of a pumpkin's grown. And so it's kind of come full circle now, coming back to the farm. And, we're doing this fall festival and doing some different other community events throughout the year. And it's just like, there you can do both of it. Yeah. And you have business education too, to have some idea of how to organize things and operate things correctly so you don't go broke or something. Yeah, definitely taking those finances classes and those marketing classes where my dad didn't really push me to get an ag degree. And so he's like, you can get it in business, and that there's definitely a business aspect of it that he's like, you can be a great farmer, but if you don't know business and, the finance side of it, then you can fail real quick. And so kind of getting some of those fundamentals down and, learned and then apply it to the farming practices really helped as well. That's where I'm at right now, because part of me
It's like, I miss, having my hands in the dirt and farming a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still around it. I live right in the middle of it.
Yep.
But I don't do it myself. And there's still part of me, you know how it is.
Yep.
It's in your blood.
Yep.
But that's the part that I'm missing. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I wish I would have gotten a business degree or even a minor in business, have some basics, because I just feel like I have a lot of gaps in my knowledge to do that part of it. And especially in the current economic and, political, regulatory, climate, everything, you have to have that part together to make it work. Like you said, even if you're a great farmer, good at growing the plants, if you have no sense of how to put the books together, you're not going to be able to survive very long. Yep. Which is a shame, but it's the truth. Mm-hmm. So as a farmer and someone with business education, what would you say are the key things to keep in mind for people in farming as far as watching what their business is doing?
Well, it's making sure you have a marketable product that you can sell it. And so, and then finances, making sure it all pans out because
watch those numbers.
Yeah. If those numbers if they fluctuate, we always, especially in the office, the gal that's working in there, and my mom that's in there, and my brother Mark that's in there, they're making sure that our numbers are pretty conservative, whatever it may be. And I'm like, hey, aren't we going to make more money than that? And we're like, well, yeah, we are, but we will need to be as conservative as possible. Worst case scenario, this is as much money we're going to make, but we're still going to make a little bit, of profit. And so it's always making sure that the bottom line's still being met. And
watching your costs then, because all your costs come before.
And holy smokes, is the cost so high this year. Yeah. You can, even everything's up. Anywhere and everywhere. Sometimes we have to go to Boise, 5 hours away to go get a part, and PVC's up in prices, lumber's up, everything's up. So seed costs, fertilizer, it seems like everything's going up. And so you got to make sure that everything's still penciling out at the end. And so, because the seed company is not going to tell you whether or not their prices are going up. If you just say, hey, I need that seed or I need that fertilizer, and you don't shop around, it can really bite you in the butt.
Yeah. Well, and that's what a lot of people do. You get in the thick of it, the heat of it. You don't necessarily have a plan. I need this, I need that. I'm just going to go get it, keep going, and hopefully we make enough money to cover all the bills. You're kind of shooting in the dark then. You may come out roses, or you may find at the end of it that you're not going to make it. Yep. Scary stuff, that farming stuff.
There's some things that we did this year that we changed, we tweaked it, and we were going to grow sweet corn this year. Every year we usually grow sweet corn. This year we decided not to grow sweet corn. We grew field corn, and just because the price of the field corn went up, and we could bale the corn stalks and sell the corn stalk bales too, so that we could. There's a little bit of money to be made on everything, and so there's some things that just pan out better than others, and so that was like a 2-week decision. We changed it. The whole entire year we were planning for sweet corn, and then it was about 2 weeks before planting, and we're like, hey, we should plant something else. And so that's what we did, just because it didn't pencil out the way that we were thinking.
Yeah, that's what Brady Carstetter up in Quincy said on the podcast several episodes back too, that he did this year with those prices changing, and just change the plan. You may have all this plan made, but you got to be able to adjust on the fly, whether it's the weather, whether it's markets, whether it's changing rules, COVID, pandemic, craziness. That's.
I think, just speaking on the COVID pandemic thing, is that I think a lot of us farmers were prepared for it better than maybe other industries, is because we're always changing in what we do, because we're always dependent on weather, different other outcomes, and every single year where you think it's going to plan out perfectly, it never does. It's always something that's changing. And I think we handled COVID pretty well, because like farmers are used to getting their crops rained on alfalfa or something. It's like, okay, well, we got to change it up a little bit. We're always facing some type of adversity, and so we got to change it and keep on moving forward. There's nothing, you can't just sit around and pout about it. You just keep on going and adjusting.
Well, good luck with the rest of hay season. Yeah. And prep for the fall festival. Okay, so Middleton, is it Middleton or Middleton's? Middleton's Fall Festival.com.
.com. Yep.
Okay, middletonsfallfestival.com, middle of September. I'll see if I can arrange my schedule to be out here at some point during that, because I would like to see that. Yep. That sounds really, really cool.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'll be open.
Well, thank you for doing it all.
Thank you for coming out.
Growing amazing, delicious food.
Yeah.
Asparagus and strawberries and all kinds of other stuff. And then, I'm sure there's a lot of cows and other animals that appreciate eating your alfalfa.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that delicious food for me. And then also being, educating and opening up your place to the public. I think that's really cool. And for a lot of people, that's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
But for you guys to have the guts to do that and be really plugged in with your community, I think that's awesome. So
it's fun.
Good luck with all of it, and thanks for chatting with us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast. These are the stories of the people who grow your food.